What's going on, guys? It's Frito here for your Overwatch. This patch is pretty darn good. A few heroes got aggressive changes, and with a lot of changes to hero ultimates, either going up or down, the hierarchy of the game has stabilized a lot, which is interesting that they don't use that balance lever more often, because as it turns out, getting your ult faster in Overwatch is one of the more substantial buffs you can give a character. Let's talk about one of the biggest standouts first, though. Mercy, I think, is better than she was before. You can debate the fun factor and how they should design the hero all you want, but what they did was remove some of the biggest weaknesses Mercy used to have and turned them into strengths. I think in truth, you don't actually need all that GA movement as much as you think. Like, it's annoying maybe and clunky and you don't like it, but stats-wise, Mercy is objectively better in my opinion. And here's why. She used to lack burst heal. Well, now she has that, gaining a burst of healing on critical allies. Her ultimate used to be weak. So much so that you probably want to use it as a tempo ult to press an advantage. It turned the Moth into a battle Mercy sometimes. But since you can do extra healing on critical allies with your ultimate, you can use it as response as a defensive ult as well in many cases. Then on top of that, of course, damage amp makes a lot of the best DPS in the game even better, and so much so that they hard win their matchups oftentimes, and it's very hard for a DPS player to take a mirror or any DPS duel, to be honest, with a Mercy attached. Oh, and another weakness she used to have, she was bad at healing tanks, but since they have so many cooldowns in Overwatch 2, they're going to survive anyway. Getting down to half, you can even pocket them more efficiently. Mercy is just good in every situation, in my opinion, and nearly a must pick. Like, you can play other comps, and she can be countered by dive, but if there is a must pick on this patch, it's going to turn out to be Mercy, I think. We're not at Valk 1.0 levels, but the amount of value, considering how free it kind of is if you're not getting flanked, pretty insane. Now, the rest of the support cast is pretty well balanced, in my opinion, and in fact, the game is very well balanced as far as I can tell, but I did put a lot of thought into the placement of this A tier. It might feel shocking to see Kiriko so low on the list, but remember, my tier lists are aimed at the 90% of players, not the top 1%. The more organized your team is, and the better your kunai accuracy is to make yourself a threat, Kiriko is a top pick, but the other characters have easier interactions, better tank matchups for sure, considering, remember, Roadhog's not good. So Cleanse isn't going to just be a free win. Just toss it on your tank, remove an anti, and then your tank will carry for you if you're playing Hog. That's not how this patch works. There's much longer tank battles and more interesting matchups. But with that being the case, Moira I put at the top of the list because of her potential to play up tempo, go aggressive, and win a lot of duels. In a more scrimmy, chaotic game, there's a lot of picks that the opposing team can take where Moira will kind of free duel them, and when your support can defend themselves that easily, as well as be flexible with their mobility and have a free escape, Moira is really easy and a lot of strong value until you reach ranks where they can headshot her. But it takes a while to get high enough to be really afraid of getting one bursted as Moira. You may be surprised to see Brigitte so high in the list all of a sudden, but keep in mind, she's one of the biggest benefactors of the ult charge buffs in my opinion. She is amazing at farming up ult as a playstyle because she wants to play keep away. There's a lot of tanks in the game right now, including Wrecking Ball, who's getting popularity due to his buffs, where knocking him away, dodging away, turtling up yourself, and healing your team with a big AoE heal, and now she even has a little bit of burst on her repair packs to save allies. Getting your ultimate faster as a support is where you're going to really carry the game, which applies to the two heroes above her as well. Coalescence got buffed, but also Mercy. I know higher ranked Mercy players will tell you that damage boost is still where the value is, and they're right at GM level, but maximizing your healing, keeping your team alive to get more ultimates is how you're going to carry out of the average tier rank and really support diff the enemy supports. While damage amp will let your DPS carry, often they won't, and you'll need your ultimate to carry. And while Brig gets her ult so fast now, it out-tempos a lot of other support ults. And getting first ult, especially a support ult in Overwatch, is such a big deal because it snowballs advantages and map control and everything. Incredible power now in the support category after this last patch. Batiste is quite high because you're going to see a lot of Reinhardt. Good with Orisa and Sigma as well, as long as the enemy isn't playing too fast and you're stabilizing. Batiste is quite nuts, but won't be as easy to play as some of the picks above him. Keep in mind, you will need to be the one pressuring out the Mercy. You got to land headshots and damage while you're healing in order to really maximize this pick. But when you do, remember, Reinhardt can one-shot squishies through amplification matrix Matrix now. But Ana can do all those things too, is just a bit harder to play, more easily run over, but has some pretty strong interactions, and considering I think Junker Queen's quite good, having two characters that can apply AoE anti can overwhelm the enemy's Suzu, so they can't even necessarily counter that comp. Hideko falls way down on the list, as while I think higher tier players will still maximize what she can do, it's just that her skill set isn't easy anymore. You better be landing headshots with kunai to match the level of aggression and multitasking that Moira can do. She throws an orb in your team and can heal her team at the same time. Hideko is deciding between healing or damaging and isn't getting her ult as fast as some of the other supports now that got buffs. So while Kitsune Rush is still devastating, its farm rate isn't really competing necessarily, so it's more balanced than before. Suzu does outplay a lot of things in the game. Remember, it does cleanse hack and EMP. Players are going to be trying Sombra again now that she got buffed. If you have a Roadhog, I think Hideko is a must pick. Otherwise, he's going to get rolled over anyway, so you might as well pick it and try your best. But I think she's not required like previous metas. And with a lot of these picks, your skill is going to, of course, up or downgrade them. A lot of players struggle with Brig, player in the front line, for example. A lot of players want to just heal bot with Kiriko, but there's easier healing stats to gain in the game now. Keep in mind, against shields, Hideko is useless, whereas a character like Baptiste, for example, can shoot and heal, or Moira's orbs and coalescence pierce shields. That'll be important when we get to the tank category. Zenyatta's a bit exploitable, but also can auto-win. There's quite a lot of sniper maps still, and with Widow getting a bit of a nerf, Zen has an opportunity to not too easily lose the sniper battle, and if he survives, you sort of auto-win the tank battle because you just discord the enemy tank. There's a lot of tanks that get hard marked by Zen. And considering you might be able to play Mercy, which you may fear that Mercy Zen isn't enough healing, well, since she can triage heal your way to victory and clutch heal, I don't think that feels that way anymore. But also Brig or Baptiste are really good with Zen to protect him. So there's a lot of opportunities to get the Zen pick to work. And especially if you run like Ana Zen, the enemy tank is going to have a horrible time getting discorded and antied. There's a lot of cases where the only option you have is to hard go at the enemy's backline. And that's kind of where I get Moira to be so high on the list, because throwing a damage orb into the backline against some of these picks is one of the better ways to enable aggression towards it. I'd say especially against Ana, Kiriko, and Zen. It's quite up-tempo against them, but damage orb slows down against the higher healing amounts like Brig and Baptiste. Into the B tier though, I do put Lucio. While getting your Reinhardt around, I think you might find that he might not need the speed as much as he originally did now that he has charge on a lower cooldown. It's going to be map depending. And while Lucio did also get a boost to his ultimate farm rate, he's now losing the neutral game, I think, to Brig in that same spot, or, you know, Mercy for sure, 100%. And you don't really ever want to be focusing on healing as Lucio anyway. The other supports are better at that. Do you really need speed in this meta? Well, the tanks are pretty mobile. Junker Queen's got her own shout. Orisa and Sigma don't move, and Ryan has a pin buff, which allows him to reposition himself. So Lucio's good with Ryan and Winston maybe, but not required, I don't think. So he might be even lower than B tier, but when executed well, you can still get him to work. Probably best with Lucio and Moira as a combination, or Lucio and Baptiste supporting a Reinhardt. Onto the tank picks now. Reinhardt is a character that I think is going to get extra value early in the season and at lower ranks because he's easier to play now. That hog doesn't just hard outstat him. Carrying with your ultimate is always big on tank as well, and Earthshatter is significantly better, and the Fire Strike buff helps him confirm kills that he wasn't getting before. So a lot of things are really going into Ryan's favor. Later on in the season, I think when players remember how to outplay Ryan comps and don't go to the objective with all these other tanks expecting to beat the Rhine, his stats are going to overwhelm you on the objective. Okay, so there's a few tanks that can kind of go toe to toe with him, but for the most part, you got to attack his team and play on the high ground above him in order to counter Rhine. Otherwise, he's going to hard roll the objective and you're just going to look silly trying to fight him head up. And that's kind of where the rest of the A tier comes into play. Sigma is outrageous right now because he can shield and shoot and has a stun. There's a ton of matchups that he's nuts in. While he can get rushed down by Reinhardt, there's a lot of maps in the game that are sniper friendly and quite a few matchups that he hard wins in the tank category. And even some with his skill expression, if you land your stuns, you can win anyway. Sigma's super easy right now. You're going to notice that Wrecking Ball's not in the A tier. We'll talk more about him. I think Doomfist is the better version of him still. And Orisa, I think, is quite overrated. However, does have a few maps where she can really hard anchor a position. Like, for example, Blizzard World A, she's nuts at holding. But just about any other map, if you're used to Orisa being effective at lots of ranges, remember she got a range decrease significantly. Tanks like Reinhardt and Sigma can kind of just walk towards you. And the whole, like, cycle your cooldowns and never die thing, well, you look silly fighting into a shield with all of your damage getting soaked up. After talking about this more, I might even say that Ryan, Sigma, and Junker Queen are like in the A+ tier. The only reason why I wouldn't make that distinction in the tier list is because certain maps are going to really change whether that's the case or not, and I'm trying to make a more global assessment. But Junker Queen has the stats to out-brawl a lot of characters. You might even say that if you were skilled with her, she's S tier, and her damage numbers are just so high that a lot of other picks are going to be too slow in comparison. All the A tier tanks have high damage output potential. Orisa is kind of the lowest one after her range nerf, but you're going to find that it's a lot easier when you pick one of these higher damage tanks right now. However, I will say in certain matchups, Winston is an A or S tier pick. It's just that he can be countered by a lot of characters that hard mark Winston, so he can't really be placed higher in my opinion. The mobility he offers makes him very competitive against the tanks above him in the list. It's just that there's DPS picks, especially like Reaper or Bastion, that are so difficult to play into, you might as well just play something else who actually can fight them. Ramatra is the biggest bait pick in the entire game. He takes a lot more skill than I think players have to play him, and have in the previous season mostly gotten boosted by how powerful his ult is. I see a lot of Ramatra players with very low limbs and high damage as they just do meaningless damage to the enemy tank, don't kill anything, and farm ult. That may have gotten you some wins in the previous season, but players have learned how to outplay the ult better, and there's just more severe damage options or better defensive options in the tank category. I don't know. I think Ram is one of those tanks, if you have the skill, you can get more out of him. And then on top of that, I think he needs your team to really stabilize themselves because he just doesn't move anywhere fast enough to make plays on a lot of things. So he's got to sort of catch the enemy team into him, and you just play fast with any of the tanks above him on the tier list, and I think you're gonna have an easier time. Like, for example, Wrecking Ball likes to play up against Ram, I'd say. Just ignoring him and quickly getting on his team. But I feel like Wrecking Ball's numbers just still aren't that impressive to me. Like, you got characters like Junker Queen, who's got a shotgun and a rallying cry with a CC, and she self-heals, and there's like so many ways. Or you look at Doomfist, for example, with the power block and the big AoE stuns and damage. The other tanks just have easier ways to confirm kills, I feel. Yes, they buffed Wrecking Ball's ultimate, but all the tank ults are good. Whereas Doomfist has the damage to really make Brig think twice. Brig can hard mark Wrecking Ball, and I feel like his animations are even easier to hit for Ana as opposed to Doomfist, who has a smaller model and faster horizontal movement. I think Ball's a bit overrated, but if you have good targeting with your team, particularly against Mercy, you get Ball and Tracer shooting at a Mercy, you can really flush her out, but I don't think that sets you up to have good matchups against a lot of other things. Zarya's still in the B tier. She's got Cleanse, which matters in some matchups. She can work her way up to higher damage, but she's not good against hit scans, which are very strong right now. She gets slowed down by shields quite significantly, and considering Ryan and Sigma have the option of damaging and shielding, Zarya's got niche applicability. While she can outplay some interactions of other tanks, I just don't think she's good enough against enough DPS picks. D.Va and Roadhog in the C tier, kind of similar. Few good matchups. With a perfect comp, I think you can see them do okay. D.Va would be better if we had Gibraltar in the list. A lot of the push maps are very horizontal. Like, there's a couple high ground spots, but it's not like you're constantly going up and down on them. So D.Va's just kind of a slow pick overall. And I think with how many good tank ults there are, Self-Destruct is a pretty difficult one to get reliable value out of. And down here at the bottom, Roadhog can still be played with Kiriko, but it's going to pale in comparison to the top tier tanks. Like, he can get his picks, but you got to win a lot of fights in Overwatch. So there's a lot of team fights where Hog just doesn't have the utility to interact. Onto the DPS category now. I do keep Sojourn as the #1 DPS in the game since they buffed her ultimate to be a lot easier to use, and her escapability really matters. That flexibility she has to switch between applying pressure and playing a pick-off sniper game. Even for average tier players, I think she's pretty good. Keep in mind as well, a lot of things are affected by the Widowmaker health nerf. So while on one hand, they nerfed, quote unquote, Sojourn's one-shot, well, they nerfed Widowmaker's health. So now Sojourn is good against her again. Because of her mobility, she can play against a lot of comps and play with a lot of comps. So still a great pick. Cassidy's 5-meter range increase matters a ton, and he had already been creeping up to be pretty good in my opinion. Magnetic Grenade is one of the strongest DPS abilities for the average player. Fanning the hammer into a tank is a lot of damage without much effort. How tanky the Fortified effect is when he uses Deadeye. There's a lot of reliable kills that Cassidy can play in with your team with a lot of these teamwork deathball-y style comps and do really well. Don't flank as Cassidy though. You can get your corny flank kills here and there, but his ability to lay down extra pressure from the front line into the enemy's front line is what you're going to really excel at. While Junkrat got significant nerfs, well, one in particular, the mine damage is way down. The game is more mid-range because of the Widow nerf. So characters are closer or there's more middle range characters against you. And there's a lot of comps that either want to play together or just maps in the game where you can get spots and positions to play the Junkrat shenanigans I've been talking about since release. Spamming from safety into travel lanes where there just isn't a lot of good options. Like, think about it. Diva and Zarya aren't considered very good. So while Sigma can eat the Junkrat spam, a lot of the other tanks aren't a huge fan of it coming to hit them in the face or their team. So while his mine combos have gone down, it's not like Genji is considered incredibly strong. Echo and Pharah are kind of middling picks considering how strong the hit scan picks are in the game. So a lot of the game still comes to Junk for him to be pretty good. The free kills he gets goes down, of course, but the mobility to get into position and getting more out of his primary fire is where you're going to see Junk still be pretty good, and trapping a tank is, you know, pretty nuts. Since Mercy is so good, Ashe and Tracer are good either with or against, or both really, because Ashe can sniper out of the sky, but the damage breakpoints of getting damaged amp as Ashe is pretty nuts. She outranges Cassidy still, and if you can hit the AD strafe of Sojourn, can fight that matchup. It's not great in my opinion, but because Widowmaker's health went down, especially with a Mercy, you'll be good against her, and Bob is an insane ultimate as well. Tracer's going to work great as the best diver in the game. You kind of need somebody to play the objective, play the off angles, go in with the tank from the backside, and there's no other pick that's going to be uncontested by hit scans other than Tracer, who moves in horizontally under them. The ones that fly in the sky, like Pharah, Genji, and Echo, aren't strong enough, and seeing as you probably should be seeing Mercy, playing against a hit scan with a Mercy on it, those other flanker picks are going to get sniped too easily, whereas Tracer can navigate around in order to get onto the Mercy and get reliable damage on her. Widowmaker's still top of the list, even though there's shields in the game, even though she got nerfed, just because there's some sight lines that are OP for Widow. She's more easily countered, but her potential is high enough that I keep her in A tier. Casino Royale, Junkertown, Colosseo, the list kind of goes on and on. There's long lines of sight that Widow is the only pick that can do what she does. Onto the B tier now. I do put Pharah quite high on the list because Mercy is so much stronger, and particularly if you don't have an enemy Mercy, Pharah is going to have a good time against a lot of the hit scan characters, even with the range increases and everything. Just because there's quite a lot of vertical cover on a few maps, like Shambali Temple is my favorite. The rest of the B tier we're gonna call situational, and really this whole section is situational, needing the right map and matchup. There's more reliable DPS picks above them. Reaper might be higher on the list if I thought Mei and Sombra were better. With their buffs, you'll be seeing them a lot, so remember that Reaper has good interactions against them, but a lot of these picks just aren't reliable enough at medium or longer ranges, or their burst isn't frequent enough. Fine, but not top. C tier, I'm gonna say be careful using these picks. Sombra's a bit of a bait pick. Yes, she got buffed. She's a bit better. She'll farm ult faster. She has better breakpoints on some of her duels, but still is a teamwork reliant pick. And when your team positions poorly or you guys don't go in together, it can be more effort than it's worth to get the Sombra to work. Mei got her ult charge rate increased, so she'll get Blizzard faster, but the rest of her game is pretty whack. It's possible that she sees better use early on in the season when players are struggling to outplay a wall and just the Mei plays that exist, but I'm not too convinced that she's going to stay around. I thought Bastion was pretty situational and decent in the previous patch, but he's kind of unrequired on this one. There's a bit more mobility required out of the DPS position and a little less attrition. Like, you can punish Ramatra and over-aggressive tanks, but most of them have either the defense or mobility to dodge the sentry form, and as long as you do that, Bastion's not that good. But sort of just like Mei. It's like if the tank doesn't know how to outplay these abilities down here in the C tier, then yes, they'll do well, but you're kind of all in on them making that mistake, and I don't know if that's going to take you very far in the ladder. Far enough, maybe, but a bit overrated in my opinion. Echo I've got quite low, because I think she's bad against hit scans that are the top of the game right now. You're probably not going to see that much Pharah or Genji, who she has good matchups against, so if you're skilled with her, you can put her higher in the list. Mercy's heal boost on critical targets is a nerf to Focusing Beam. Sombra and Mei have much better ultimates. I think she's got more effort than required. And that's the entire tier list, guys. Season 3 shaking up to be pretty balanced, to be honest. This is the most balanced the game's been in a while. What do you think of Season 3 so far? Remember, you can send in replay codes of losses that you thought you played well to the Google Forms submission page, linked in the description. I've been watching through them for Season 3. We've got some cool videos coming up that I think is going to help you guys out a lot. Make sure you don't miss out on those videos. Be sure to click the subscribe button and the bell icon to actually get notified when our videos come out. If you enjoyed this video, leave it a like. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.